So without further ado, I'm going to ask you to introduce yourselves. So if you could introduce your name, your business, and I would really like to understand your why for setting up your business.
Great.
Rachel.
So firstly, thank you for having us here today, seeing such an amazing array of talented women in the room. So my name's Rachel Chesters. I'm the founder of Start Communication Limited. My why, and I tend to kind of gravitate to this phrase quite a lot, but I'd say I'm an accidental female founder. The female bit's not so accidental. You know what I mean, you know what I mean. In that, like so many women, I got made redundant on maternity leave 9 years ago now, and that sort of propelled me into a world of self-employment. So I started out as a freelancer, and yeah, kind of found my groove and decided, that was that. I wanted to work for myself, and I've scaled the business ever since. So yeah,
Brilliant.
that's my why. My why was an accident.
An accident. We'll come on to that a little bit more, so
Yeah.
thank you very much. Claire?
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name's Claire Quantzer, and I founded Quantzer Consulting, very original name. And I guess my why is similar to Rachel. I was made redundant a couple of years ago and spent some time kind of working out what I wanted to do. And there weren't that many jobs available, so I thought this is my chance to do something different, take a bit of a risk from other people telling me they could possibly do with my skills and experience. So I thought I'd give it a go, and my children are still fed, so I think I'm doing an all right job.
Brilliant, thank you. And Tiffany?
Hi, I'm Tiffany Fawn. I'm the founder and CEO of a company called Bivitrix Therapeutics. So we design precision anti-cancer therapeutics. The why is an interesting one. So I had a job in the NHS. I worked as a clinical immunologist, and I hated the fact that my career path was so secure and mapped out in front of me, and there was this clear path to becoming a consultant. And I hate that. I like risk, and I like responsibility. I like making life really hard for myself. So I left. I joined a risky biotech company, and then there was an idea that I had from using a technique I was using in the clinic, which I actually thought could be used to make better cancer drugs. And I was just surprised that nobody else had had that idea, because people don't typically move from like a clinical public sector to the private sector. So, and I thought it was a daft idea, but I was quite fortunate that the CEO I worked for at the time thought it was good and gave me some encouragement. So I guess it was kind of accidental as well. I didn't set out to fund a company.
Fantastic, brilliant. Claire, I'm going to come to you first. So obviously you've mentioned that redundancy, and now you set up your own consultancy. And it's, a couple of years now, is it?
Yeah.
A couple of years. Yeah. What's that journey been like for you? Because there might be people in the room that are going through the similar journey, whether that's accidental, whether that's through redundancy, whether that's all through flexible working. So what's the past 2 years look like from you, the highs and the lows?
I mean, it's very much that. I always describe it to people as a roller coaster. Literally, one day I'm like, this is great, I'm so glad I'm doing this. The next day I'm like, this is the worst decision I've ever made in my life. What am I doing?
Relatable.
And it just keeps on going like that. And that is quite difficult to kind of get your head around and get used to, because I had been, working in agencies for the best part of 20 years, so having that consistency, knowing you're going to be paid at the end of every month, regardless of how many clients you're working with, what's happening, so many things that are done for you, admin, finance, everything is being done for you, so then suddenly having to go and sort all of that stuff out for yourself, trying to bring in business, working out what it is you're going to do, it takes a real mindset shift to be able to work it out, whilst also, in my position, having, a mortgage to pay and kids to feed and whatnot. So it's definitely been a real learning curve and is very up and down. And I think there's that element of getting used to the irregularity of it. So knowing that actually that is often the way it's going to be, or going to be for a long time, but knowing that, getting used to the idea that it's going to be up and down, that's taken me some time to get used to. I'll be honest, I think my first year was very good, so then I thought, oh, I'm good at this. Second year, not so good, because I'm working with agencies and things. A lot of agencies had a bad year, which then has a knock-on effect. So the second year was very much, oh gosh, what is going on? Let me find a job, let me go back into employment. But then thinking, okay, then maybe I should give it a go and keep on and keep on going. But yeah.
Yeah, what kept you going? You know, because I can totally relate to that. You know, having had a business and now going back out, like just myself and Natalie, and I do some work on my own now. And those moments where you have a gap and then everything comes at once. But when you have that gap, to like go knee-jerk reaction, I need to go and get a job, you know, that stability. What has kept you going through those sort of periods of uncertainty around knowing that I want to keep going on that track?
I think what helps is, and again, it's taken me a while to get to that because I'll be honest, at times I was like on LinkedIn searching for jobs and thinking, what am I going to do? Having other people encourage you that can tell you actually you are doing a good job. You know, whether that's people that you've worked with in the past and things, just be able to say, actually, do you know what, you are good at it, keep on going. Having other people to encourage you to keep on going. But also then taking the time to really then think about how you can do things better, so be able to refine what I'm doing and thinking, how can I tweak it to start to bring in more opportunities. But I'm very much, I think I'm about people. So I think having people around you who can support you, encourage you, people that might be in a similar situation that make you realise that actually you're not the only person that's having, you know, a terrible month or a terrible quarter, that makes you realise, okay, then it's not just me, it's not that the whole world hates me and doesn't want to buy my services. And you realise that that's okay, that's normal, and you can carry on going.
And I think that's really important about that vulnerability side, isn't it? It's around like, yes, it's about being realistic. And I think this is, again, one of the purposes of today, like, hopefully getting people to meet each other and actually be vulnerable with each other that then can go on and support each other as well.
Because it's so easy to assume that everybody's doing really, really well and you're the only person that's doing badly. And especially, you know, in a world of social media, Instagram, LinkedIn, you see everybody, like you say, people will post good things, but not many people will say, actually, I've only been paid £200 this month. You know, nobody really kind of says that, that type of stuff, do they? So being able to have conversations with other people that will say, I totally get it, it's fine, you know, keep on going, can just make all the difference.
And on the reverse side of that, how do you find like shouting about your successes as well? Like, as I'd sort of alluded to the fact, and it's one of the things that, you know, I've heard time and time again, we don't as women necessarily find it easy to shout about successes. I know from my point of view, it's almost putting some LinkedIn posts out and I have to close my eyes and press that button and go, but I think by doing it, it does help other people. How have you felt that over, like you said, you had a really great 12 months. Did you shout about that, or was there a bit of reluctance in that?
There definitely was reluctance. I mean, I'm very comfortable posting things on LinkedIn generally, but not really kind of saying if I've done a good job as much. I've tried to start doing it more, but it can be quite uncomfortable. But I think shouting about yourself and putting yourself out there, you have to do it, especially, you know, there's something about knowing you need to get paid, you need to grow your business, that actually I've had to force myself to do that more often. And I think in the day I've got a PR background, I need to practice what I preach. If I was telling clients in the past that they need to get themselves out there and speak to their audience, I probably need to do the same thing. And I have to almost treat myself like my own client and say, right, okay, then I need to do these things. I need to put myself out there more, and just then turn your laptop off and walk away after you've posted whatever it is.
I was listening to a great podcast yesterday about negative self-talk, etc. And it was one of the tips was talking to yourself in that third person. So like, come on, Becky, you can put that post out there, and Becky, you are doing all right. So it's almost like, because you would say it to somebody else, or saying it by saying it to a third person, it will help that situation. Thank you. Rachel, I'm going to come to you. So you mentioned, again, being an accidental sort of founder, and 8 years ago, about
9 years ago.
9 years ago now, and over that 9 years, there's been events that have happened that we probably could never have predicted. Obviously, the biggest one being COVID and the pandemic, etc. How was your journey throughout that time, in terms of keeping a business going, especially, in what you do? Marketing might have been, from what I've heard, probably one of the areas that was cut. So how did you sort of navigate that?
Yeah, so great question. So there's definitely been kind of, highs and lows, the roller coaster, everything Claire just said, so relatable. For me, I think, unashamedly, in that 9 years, I went back in-house for a number of years. I actually worked for the Business Growth Hub, who I know some of whom here today. That was during that time. And I think so many of us that are founders, maybe we come at it from a freelance perspective initially, or maybe we're kind of working in a fractional role. And I love that term portfolio career, because I think it's so unashamed in saying, like, you know, I've got my fingers in different pies, and actually that's a very, very conscious choice. So yes, right now I'm scaling Start, and that's what I'm all about, and I founded it 9 years ago, but also I've ridden out those highs and lows. Like, there's, you know, I've had 2 kids in that time, as you know, Claire said, we've got mortgages to pay, so it doesn't have to be a linear journey. And I always use the phrase, probably when I'm doing a bit of what you just said, which is like talking to myself, where I go, Rachel, zoom out, right? So it's like, if you look at any one day or week or month and the decisions you made, or what hit your bank balance, or the leads that converted, you can get really hung up in the detail, and some days it's all about the detail. But actually, like, zoom out. If I look at what I've achieved, the types of clients that I've worked with, the types of roles I've had, even those kind of fallow periods where I did go back in-house in the last 9 years, all of those have led me to where I am today with a very successful business. And I have no kind of regrets or make no apologies for that. So yeah, I think it's just kind of riding out the storm, and also being realistic. Like, it's, you know, it's not about being a founder to the point that, you know, we should be, you know, not able to pay our bills, not able to feed our kids. Like, if you have to make a different decision for a period of time, that's okay. That doesn't mean you're less committed to that journey.
And that's an interesting one about that commitment in terms of being a female founder with a family as such.
Yeah.
Like, sometimes people, and I've heard the comments, said to myself, oh, you're doing it because you've got kids, you know, you want that. And I agree, the flexibility is amazing. You know, my daughter, unfortunately this week, was being in A&E, and, you know, I have been a founder myself. I was like, you know, I was able to go and be with her. But sometimes we're also looked upon in terms of we're not as serious as founders because might be just doing it because we've got children. Have you come across any sort of barriers, any sort of perceptions around that?
Yeah, definitely. I think, you know, what I call sort of TikTok hustle culture has a lot to blame, and this kind of idea that everyone, particularly women, particularly girls and young women, that we all should be sort of monetizing every side hustle that we've got. It's like, no, we are allowed to have hobbies that we don't sell on Etsy. Like, that's okay. We can just do something for the joy of it. Like, that's absolutely fine. But I do think that when women start a business, particularly kind of before they reach, or if they're not in the kind of seeking investment or private equity kind of phase of that business, or that might not even ever be part of that plan, I think then female founders and female freelancers as well it's seen as like a side hustle. And that, I think we have bigger barriers to overcome with that. And I think a lot of that comes from society's expectation that, you know, the men are the breadwinners, and we just need to, like, especially when you're a mom, a working mom, I've got 2 young kids, you know, we just need to bring in like a little bit of pocket money to like tide us over. And it's like, no, like, I'm an equal contributor in my household financially. We are 50-50 down the middle on everything, probably not the mental load, but probably everything, everything else. And, you know, and so, you know, my job is not a side hustle, and my husband's job is proper. It's like, no. And I think women have to explain that a lot more than men do.
Yeah, and touching upon your point there, and I think this is, again, one of the reasons why today is so important to me, because I think if I look at the events in Manchester for women, especially, a lot talk about like that investment piece. It's like that pinnacle sort of piece around, and I understand, you know, people need money, need finance, but then it sort of segregates people that actually there is nothing talking about like founder if you're not going through that journey. And I think that's what we wanted to try and do today. Yeah, obviously we've got the British Business Bank here talking about funding, and obviously it is a really hot topic, but not everybody's on that journey. I scaled and sold a business without taking investment, bootstrapped it for a period of time, and then grew it organically. Yes, didn't get the growth as probably I would if I took investment, but there is another world around that, outside of that as well. And I think you can still have growth around that. And I think I totally agree. When I sort of said no to sort of going on that journey, it's almost, oh, well, why are you doing it? And I'm like, well, I can still be a successful business founder without going through that journey. So it's very, very true.
Yeah, and I think as women, we're pretty good at bootstrapping businesses. I think probably that comes from, you know, so many of us starting on this journey, not all at all, but a large number, you know, getting made redundant. I mean, the statistics on the number of women every year, I think it's up to 70,000 women a year are made redundant whilst on maternity leave. You know, I was one of them. I was breastfeeding through my redundancy meetings. So I think, you know, and for anyone that's ever been on maternity leave, we are good at bootstrapping. We are good at making like not very much cash go quite far.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I think it's like that's acceptable. And I think that the organisations, of which there are many, that are doing amazing work to make sure females and women have the same access to funding and finance as men, because that is a challenge.
Yeah.
But there's lots of really good stuff and very knowledgeable people doing a lot of work in that space.
Yeah.
But I think the other conversations are just as important.
Definitely. Fantastic. Coming to you, Tiffany. Obviously, you've went into a sector that very, very male dominated. Okay, you've been in there, what, about 10 years?
Yeah, just less
10
than
years,
10
yeah.
years,
Give us the warts and all around that 10-year journey, around, you know, being CEO of a medtech business, male-dominated, you know, now like globally, you know, tell us some sort of like what it's been like for you.
That's an interesting one. It's an interesting sector as well, because obviously for a business like drug development, you need to seek investment from the outset, so you don't get the control of growing your business how you want to grow it. You're working for investors from day one. And just to sort of comment on the roller coaster ride, I mean, I thought it was an interesting idea, but we had no data. It was a concept. We weren't a typical spin out. Usually, you know, it's a spin out from Cambridge, Oxford, you know, London-based university. So, you know, we just broke the mold in every way. And I remember saying to the people I worked for at the time, I want to actually go out and try and raise the money. I wrote the business plan. It was my idea. I was the founder. And they just laughed at me. And I was like, oh, my God. But I did do it, and they weren't around, they weren't available on those days, so I had to sit in a room on my own, and the investors brought like 15 drug development industry experts from like AstraZeneca. So I don't know how I got through that, but they did actually decide to invest. And the best email I ever got was from my previous boss, who said, we're all going to go and eat some humble pie now, because the whole board didn't think that was possible. So that was like the real high, and I thought, this is brilliant. You know, we had to turn investors away. And then after a year, it got really hard, because then when it's easy to get sort of very early stage investment, but then as soon as you need to scale, you find that you're then competing with the Cambridge professors, the Oxford professors, and most investors in the UK, Europe, and the US, there's hardly any females that actually make the investment decisions. And you find that it's very, as I say, male dominated. It's very dominated by, you know, individuals that have gone to private schools. They all get to know each other. They've got their community, and they tend to invest in their, you know, fellow, you know, previous schoolmates and things like that. So if you're not part of that community, and I guess, you know, being female, being younger, being from the north, it's just, it's not what they used to. So that's been really challenging throughout. And I think one of the things that I would like to sort of really advocate for is to make sure that the board that those investors put around an individual is appropriate for that individual. You know, a lot of the time you don't, in my sector, you don't get a say in who your board directors are, so who you end up working for. And, you know, they typically, again, put, you know, seasoned, as they call them, but generally, you know, what is it, pale, male and stale, people around you. And my board, the average age on my board, other than myself, for the last 10 years, and we've had different directors come and go, has been about 65 to 70 years old. We even had an individual who was 85. Wow. So like trying to understand my generation and the way they worked, and obviously everything was like really old-fashioned values. And for them, you know, they kind of left their wives with their children, and everything was about the business. And even if you were a woman, they expected the same. So it became really challenging when I had 2 children. I think one of my chairman at the time said, don't tell anyone that you're having a child. Don't tell any of your fellow directors, don't tell any of the investors. We'll hide it. And I was like, this is ridiculous. So I told the other directors myself, but we were a public company at the time on the London Stock Exchange, and my broker actually hid me in a room and said, we'll make an excuse, we'll tell them that you've got an injury, so you can't physically go to a meeting, and you'll do a video call. And we'll just never tell them that you've had a child. And I just thought, how old-fashioned is that? So,
That leads to a little bit about one of the questions that's come in. What did you then do? Has that sort of made you be more vulnerable with your experiences because you don't want somebody else to go through that? So would you openly share that? Because I'm sure there'll be not just you that's happened to, but do you now think that that's given you a platform to say, don't do this?
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It just kind of, makes you bolder with going out and telling everyone, because it's so ridiculous.
Yeah.
This just shouldn't happen. And I think, it's different, but there's someone in my team that's expecting at the moment, and, just trying to have a bit more empathy about that situation, make sure we've got really flexible policies in place, I think is really important.
Yeah, brilliant. And I think that's one of the reasons, or one of the factors of how we're going to make a change is by sharing these experiences and obviously being vulnerable. So I'm going to ask a few questions now, because we've had quite a lot come through. Okay. What do we think about showing our vulnerabilities with honesty? In the business environment as women, we know that confidence sells. Can vulnerability sell? Yeah, go on.
That,
Yeah.
okay. I think being vulnerable can be a really powerful tool, but I think being authentic is more powerful. So I think it's about being really honest, being your authentic self. So, but absolutely, we're not hiding pregnancies. We're not pretending kids don't exist. But I think it's also about, stepping up as well. And I think we can sometimes be our own worst enemies if we play up to some of those negative stereotypes.
Yeah.
So I think that you can be authentic, you can be vulnerable. We should be sharing those challenges. There's meetings I've gone to where I've just gone, I'm sorry, I've got to down tools, I've got to go, my kids need, one of my kids has had an accident, something like that. So I think absolutely be authentic and be vulnerable when it's real. But I think also maybe, shy away from some of those, being overly dramatic or overly, or gossipy, for example. That's a really good one. Like, let's not play up to a stereotype that women are gossipy as far as work is concerned, for example. So I think, yes, be vulnerable when it's real and authentic.
Find
find the
balance and
Yeah.
being authentic. Yeah.
Yeah.
Claire?
Yeah, I think I'd agree with that. I think showing vulnerability can be a good way to connect with people. Again, if people can relate to you, often people got shared experiences, but not playing to it too much. And actually know when is the right time to show vulnerability, when it's appropriate, when it might not be. I think it's about finding that balance, but authenticity is key, isn't it? Doing it because you're doing it for the right reason, not just because it's to be performative, to look at me, I'm being vulnerable with you all now. It's about making sure that it's authentic and it's genuine.
I think you can tell, if you see snippets of vulnerability across that person's journey, you know that's authentic to you. It's almost when it comes out of the blue and you go, oh, well, never posted that way before. I think you can tell that it might be not as authentic, and they might be trying a bit too hard to be somebody that they're not.
Exactly.
Around that. So I always think about what you want to share, but be consistent with that as well. So if you are going to share vulnerabilities, make sure you do that on an often basis, so people know that is authentically you.
And that's it. It's all about authenticity. Don't feel like, oh gosh, I've got to be vulnerable in front of everybody because other people are doing it. If that's not really who you are, then don't do it. Yeah.
I'm going to move on to this one because it's I think a really interesting topic. So, as more for Rachel and Claire, how did you get comfortable pricing your services and talking about how much you charge? Because I find this fascinating. I really do. Right? Even I'm now doing public speaking. I'm now charging out. I was having a conversation the other day, pressing that button of this is how much I want for that. It's like putting a value on yourself, and it's like you're selling yourself.
It's horrible. I still get that. I remember the first time I had to quote for something, I literally did like, typed in the fee and to pull the quote to somebody, and I did actually close my laptop.
Yeah.
And I went downstairs. So I was so scared that they were going to turn around to me and be like, I'm not paying that money for you. But actually, when they came out the fine, I was like, oh, right, maybe I should have charged them more. But it is hard. It's like working out what is the right amount. And I think, again, because you feel like they're paying you, you're not paying. So, you know, back in the day working in an organisation, I'd gladly like say to a client, well, that's going to cost you £50,000 or whatever it is, but actually, because they're paying, you know, the business, they're paying a big agency, whereas actually to now say, I want you to take money out of your pocket and pay me, that felt really, really uncomfortable. I think especially because I work with a lot of kind of smaller agencies as well, I really felt like I'm asking, you know, founders who have set up their own agencies and stuff to take money from their own pockets to actually pay me, and that was quite hard. But then you realise that actually you are adding value for people, you know, they're coming to you for a reason, so actually it's about charging something that you think is right. And I did have people that said to me, and I will often say, actually it was quite a few men that were like, you're not charging enough.
Yeah.
Who were just very, very quick to say, you know, you need to charge more. I still remember a friend of mine, it was her, she's got an advisor who I had a chat with, and he was just like, Claire, that's ridiculous. So I don't know why you're charging that much. You need to, you know, charge this much. And I was a bit, oh my God, okay then. I still haven't charged as much as he told me to. But
So on that point, is there a formula? So basically, like, you know, when I was back out starting my own, so I've been in Tech Returners 7 years, wanted to do some consultancy, and I was like, well, what do people like charge with my experience anymore? And like, you can like Google it, AI, ChatGPT, but there isn't like, you know, definitive. So is there a definitive calculation for this?
Yeah, so I mean, 3 tips that I've got in relation to the question you asked, but specifically on that point. Get on all the industry benchmarking reports that you can for the sector you're in. So anyone in the creative industries, marketing, comms world, I think I posted a link on my LinkedIn, I want to say about a week ago. I'll find it.
All right, brilliant.
It. I'll put on one of those post-it notes, which was all the in-house and freelance salaries of basically every role in the creative sector. So straight away then you're armed with data. So when you say my day rate is $550 or whatever, you can feel really confident that that's the right number for the thing you're pitching for. So that's my first tip, is get on any benchmarking reports. My second tip is when you've written an email, this is a bit of a ChatGPT hack that I sometimes use, because I'm a bit guilty of writing emails like a woman, if anyone's read some of those tips, you know, which I'm not particularly apologetic for a lot of the time, you know, I will put a smiley face in an email, fine. But when you're quoting for work or you're sending out a proposal, something I like to do, and obviously I take out any kind of sensitive data, but then stick that email in ChatGPT and say, make this email or this proposal more confident, more authoritative, make it sound more assertive. And what it will spit back out, and obviously then I play around with it, but I'm like, oh yeah, because I might have been, even without even realising, and I'm a comms professional, quite apologetic in how I've worded.
Hope that's okay.
Hope it's okay. Hope it's okay. Let me know. Let me know. Phrases in there, like, you know, you can't afford, you know, there might be some wiggle room. Like, no, don't
offer it straight away.
Let me know if you want to ask any. I think you want to just
sorry if it's too much. So, you know, stick it through something like ChatGPT.
That's a good idea.
And say, you know, give it that prompt. Make this more assertive and less apologetic. And then my third tip, and this is more like a kind of, I guess my version of the shutting the laptop and walking away, is when I've sent an email, I don't know if anyone else does this, I will then hit send, like panic hit send, then I will immediately go into my sent items and read it as if I'm the recipient. Does anyone else do that?
Yeah, I do.
It's obviously ridiculous, right? Because you just sent it. But actually, sometimes that makes me feel then really reassured, because I read it and I'm like, yeah, she sounds like she knows what she's talking about. So that's just a little life hack that I have that just makes me feel more comfortable.
But on that, I did spend some time thinking though, because I guess I've kind of almost been my customer in the past. So thinking, okay, if I got this when I was working in an agency, if I got this from, you know, a potential supplier, how comfortable or how happy would I have been with that, and taking that perspective as well and thinking, okay, then would I be happy to pay that amount? Would I have expected to pay more? Is that too low? Would I think that you also kind of don't want to make yourself too cheap? So it's
Everyone
kind of
else
finding,
will squeeze you.
Exactly.
So don't squeeze yourself.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
They'll all haggle you down.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting one.
100%.
Hopefully that's given some tips around that. Is that giving some tips? Yeah, brilliant. I'm going to move on because there's been quite a lot of questions about success. And I love this because success means different things to different people. As I was sort of like alluding to the fact around, it doesn't necessarily mean sale, acquisition, investment, etc. Everybody has a different definition of success. You know, and at the moment, for me, I would probably say it's having that, you know, having that lifestyle, but also having the flexibility. You know, my children are very different ages, needing me for different things. And, you know, at the moment, my success is being able to just be there for them as well with growing a community and something that I'm very passionate about. Tiffany, I'll come to you.
Right.
Has your success changed over the years, and what does that look like now? Because you're like 10 years in, you know, you've been on the AIM market, you've come back off the AIM market, you're looking for investment. What was it, and has that changed?
I guess, yeah, so success for me at the start, and still is, you know, if you're in drug development, the idea that you could have an approved drug at some point, I mean, these things take 10, 20 years to get approved, is like a life ambition to sort of change healthcare, but that's like a big ask. So I suppose a shorter term sort of success goal is always kind of giving a return to your investors. And this is where this roller coaster comes in, because we won investment deal of the year for our sector in the north when we did the IPO, and it was all great, and then a lot of our investors did get a good return. But then now, you know, most companies in my sector, the valuations have crashed by over 90%, either on the market or off the market. So suddenly now we were a bigger company with a better valuation, and now we shrunk again. And so it's like this constant roller coaster ride where I'm not quite sure what success looks like now. And success to me right now is keeping people employed and just getting to that next milestone. It's keeping the lights on. And we were there again in COVID. You know, we almost shut down the company. I didn't get paid. Everyone left. And then we did an IPO on the back of it. It was like crazy.
Yeah.
So yeah, it changes kind of every 6 months, but we're just so influenced by what's happening in America and what's happening in the wider world. I just came back from a conference for investment in this sector, and basically the take-home message was, everyone's fundraising, no one can fundraise, keep the lights on in your business, hold tight and try and go out again next year if you're still around.
Oh, lovely.
And that was the take-home message to everybody, and I was like,
That wasn't
okay,
a
I'm not
motivational
alone.
talk.
But I think that's such a good point, is that like sometimes success looks like keeping the lights on.
Yeah.
It looks like not having to fire your staff or let anyone go. It looks like, you know, making the mortgage that month. Or, you know, paying out whatever your outgoings are. It is keeping the lights on is the measure of success on, you know, sometimes.
And I think that's right in terms of maybe being able to then adapt your expectations as well. So, like I said, you know, my first year was great, second year wasn't that great, but I set myself, the goals that I set myself, I probably did achieve. Like I remember going into it thinking, okay then, if I'm going to carry on doing this, I want to make sure that my children are fed, my mortgage is paid, and hopefully we can go on a family holiday. Kind of basic things to be able to keep on doing. I wanted to be able to do that. I decided, you know, I want to be able to work with good businesses. So, you know, they don't necessarily need to be B Corps or whatever, or charities or something. I just wanted to work with good people and good businesses. And I was able to do that, and that was a really big focus. And then I kind of said to myself as well, and you know, I talked to you a lot about diversity inclusion is really important for me, and within our sector it's not very diverse. I thought, well, actually, as one of few, you know, senior black women in the PR and comms industry, I want to keep on doing stuff that actually younger black women in the sector would look up to. And I feel like I'm doing that. So whilst I'm not a millionaire just yet, I feel like I've achieved those things, and that might not be the heady heights of success that some people might look to, but I've set those goals and I've been able to achieve them.
And that's just touching upon that point that you said then about choosing the clients, right? It's tough out there, right? You know, it's really, really tough out there at the moment around, you know, where do you post that sort of like getting yourself out there, you know, what event do I go to, what do I post, how do I win business, etc. And then business comes in, but it might not necessarily align to you and your values and what your business is about. Have you had that? And what would you recommend? Because sometimes you're in that state of desperation and you go, well, I'll just take that bit of work. And it might not be because it's ethically wrong, but might just not sit in terms of your skill set or what you actually want to do. So has anybody done that? And what have sort of their advice to people that might be in that situation now where they might be faced with a difficult decision?
Yeah, so I've got a really tangible example that's quite timely, actually, and I won't say too much, I'll get in trouble. But we walked away from a client. We did a tiny piece of work for a very large organisation last year, and let's just say we got bad vibes during the work. They were rude, they were unprofessional, there was blatant sexism happening, and just a lot of red flags. And me and my business partner made the decision to walk away from what was being dangled as a very lucrative, much, much bigger piece of work, a piece of work that probably would have paid my mortgage for the next year or two. So it was really difficult. And I went to bed that night, you know, really not knowing had I done the right thing or the wrong thing in walking away from that. My husband thought I was mad. But, you know, morally, it just didn't align with my values, my team's values. That organisation has, within the last month, been front page BBC News for all the wrong reasons. And those red flags that we picked up on were, like, you know, very, very real. And the organisation's now in a lot of hot water. So I would say, like, women's intuition.
Yeah.
Trust your gut. Like, it's never worth your sanity, your moral compass, your ability to sleep at night to work with bad people or people doing bad things.
Yeah.
And yeah, your gut instinct is your sort of best friend in that
Totally
scenario.
agree with that. I've been, you know, you have those conversations with people and sometimes you get a sense that something's not quite right. And I think being able to trust your judgment and think, actually, you know, again, if you're doing things for yourself, put yourself first. Will this opportunity, will it actually bring me peace? And obviously, you know, you're going to have stress with lots of other things, but actually sometimes you just know that something's going to bring you drama or bring you headaches and think, is it worth it? You know, there's one thing about headaches over hard work that you're committed to, but actually if it's bringing unnecessary drama to your life, then actually maybe it might not be worth it.
Yeah.
I think long term, you know, in 6 months' time, in a year's time, how will you feel about having done that piece of work and brought that much stress upon yourself?
Yeah, because I've had it where like you've been offered like a quick hit to fill a gap, you know, a piece of work, but probably a piece of work that I've not wanted to do. But then I think about it like if you take it, it actually takes time away from actually what you want to do going forward. So it's sort of like that imminent sort of pleasure bit because you've got that financial bit, but actually then you almost even on the back foot because you've taken that time away of actually focusing on what you've got. So I've sort of said, always stick true to what you want to do and who you want to work with, because it does happen and it does come. Sometimes it doesn't feel it, and trust me, I've been there. But, you know, it does, I think, remaining true to who you are and what you want, I think it's really important. Have you anything on that, Tim?
I've got an example, is like very, very different, but you know, one of the biggest costs that we're up against is manufacturing our drugs for clinical trials. And for the drugs that we make, they're on average £10 million just to manufacture enough just for like the start of a clinical trial. So our investors are always pushing for us to look at alternative ideas which can reduce the cost. And just an example of an organisation we got a quote from, it started off at 10 million. We thought, okay, you know, they sent it across, it was confident, it was in line with expectation. We thought, okay, that sounds about right. And then, like, when they didn't hear back from us, like 2 months later, they sent us an email. It's now 7.5 million. And I thought, that's weird. Yeah. And then it went down to like 5, and then it was like, suggest a number. Wow, you've lost all credibility. But of course, our investors are like, go with it. And I'm like, no, you won't have a drug at the end of it. The headaches, the pain of going down that route. But yeah, it's just an alternative.
No, but it's good that it's actually, if you reverse it, staying firm to your value as well, isn't it? Around going back to that sort of costing that, you know, you go in with a cost and they don't come back to you. try not to like stick
yes.
with what you've said, because I
Confident.
think you do can lose credibility by sort of knee-jerk reaction, go, actually, we could do this, we could do that, actually wait for a response and wait for a conversation to maybe take that forward. And the one best piece of advice I always got to talk about costs is like, when you do any proposal, like, do it like line by line, break things down. So when you then submit it to people and they say, oh, well, that's not really sort of like, we've got budget for that. So, right, okay, well, but which bits could we take out? So you're not actually like reducing your value. What you're doing is actually taking bits out so it looks like you are reducing cost, but probably you keep into the actual overall cost that you wanted to do, but you've added like bits on. And I think it's a nifty mindset shift around, you're not just reducing your bottom line figure, you're actually just taking out things that you don't have to work on. So that was probably one of the biggest sort of tips that I got from that. Next one, talking about how to find business. What has been your most effective outreach methods in 2025 to keep consistent stream of business or clients? Have you got things that have worked for you that you could share?
Networking. I don't really like kind of cold emails that much in terms of just, hi everybody, hello, do you want to buy this from me? Getting out there. I like to talk to people. I probably spend too much time talking to people rather than actually doing work. But I really like meeting new people, finding out about people, and spreading the word that way. Making sure that lots of people know that I am there, that I exist, and what I do. So whether that's in person or online as well.
I'm going to just follow up that with in terms of that tangible thing, right? And this is I get asked this question a lot. You go out to a networking event like this, right? You meet people. What do you do afterwards to try and get that connection converted to business? Because that's, you know, we're all here. You know, it might not be the person you sat next to in terms of, we'll buy some business off you, but they might then recommend you on. So how, in your best sort of practice, if you met someone here today, what should people do after today?
Make sure you connect with people on LinkedIn.
Yep.
Follow up if you can, whether that's an email or a message or whatever, and then if possible then try to arrange to kind of have a chat with somebody in more detail if you think there's an opportunity there. And I think I'd also say as well, being helpful to people, so not always just trying to get the sell, because actually if you've made a connection with somebody, you might be able to help them as much as they can help you. So you may well have, you might be able to introduce them to somebody, or you might be able to send them, a link to something. So I think you need to try to be, I think being useful, being helpful to people is good, but making sure you are, following up with conversations and being present for people, for me, that's what's helped me, because I've had people that have contacted me that it might be a few months since, and then you remember, like, oh totally, I met you at that event or whatever it was.
Yeah, and treat people, if you get a LinkedIn message that, like, maybe you can't help them at that time, always remember to be polite and, reply, because the amount of times that people have, like, then come back to me and go, oh, I've got this opportunity and da-da-da, and I think it's treat people how you want to be treated, isn't it, really, and remembering that.
I would say a really practical tip, particularly, in this kind of digital world we all live in now, there is a bit of a fastest finger first situation with some of the kind of lead gen channels that we're all living in, whether that's our WhatsApp networking groups we might be in, whether that might be our LinkedIn inbox or our email inbox, where there's no shortage of good people and talented people. Look around the room today. There will, like plenty of us in this room, will be probably competitors of each other. And so, that I'm in some brilliant networking groups, particularly WhatsApp actually has been a really great channel for me recently. And, someone will say, can anyone recommend a XYZ? And, if you're the 25th person to reply, you're probably not on that person's radar anymore, because you might be fantastic and your pitch might be brilliant, but if 4 fantastic, brilliant people replied, the first 3 or 4, is who that person's probably going to go to. They're never going to make it to you. So I do think that's a bit of a cross to bear, in that we do have to be a bit glued to our phone, and we all have to find sort of ways to manage that. But certainly for me, it's fastest finger first.
Yeah, and don't be afraid. I saw one last night around speakers to run some sessions, and don't be afraid to put yourself on that comments. You know, you got loads of people like sharing that, and what I tend to do is recommend someone else, but also say, oh, I can help you on this, this and this.
Yeah.
You know, don't be afraid to sort of shout about your own experience as well and those sort of things as well, because I think sometimes we're reluctant to go, oh yeah, I can help you with that. Right, I'm conscious I've got to round it up. Before we do, top tip for our female founders, and that any can be covered, anything, just one top tip that they could share with our founders here today.
I was saying this earlier to a couple of people, and it's something that I've been told a long time ago, and I've been reminded of it recently. Don't confuse being liked with being respected. So some people will like you, but they will gladly take the piss with your boundaries and your time or whatever. Some people may not really like you, but will be really respectful of you. And the two things can coexist. You don't have to be liked by everybody, and that's absolutely fine. Not everybody's going to respect you. That's fine, you can forget about them. But just remembering that, I think, is something that it's important to kind of make peace with and understand that that is often the way that life is, and being able to find those right people, the ones that like you and the ones that respect you. I mean, I've had people that, I'll be honest, I thought didn't like me, but they've been people that have recommended me, you know, they've said, oh, this person said you'd be great at this, can we have a chat? I'm like, God, did that person say that about me? But that's because they respect and value the work that I do. We may not be the best of friends, but, and that's absolutely fine, and we don't all need to be liked and loved by anybody. I say that as an addict to being a people pleaser, but it's fine, you get used to the fact that if people don't like you, do not worry, it's absolutely fine. The people that like you are the people that like you, the people that respect you, the people that respect you. Great if they can do both, but it's fine if they don't.
Fantastic. Tiff?
I think it's just, you know, what we said, it's such a lonely journey and there's highs and lows. So it's just surround yourself with, you know, a really supportive peer network. I know when we were sort of starting out, it was just me on my own. And I think, you know, this is bringing back that authenticity piece. That if you can be transparent, if you can be authentic, then you will bring people into your network and then you can share your experiences. And I'll just give one really quick example. There's a female CEO running a much bigger business across the way from us where we're based in Alderley Edge. And she was running AstraZeneca for the UK before that. So she had a really high-powered position. So she takes that role very differently. She's not open at all. And I remember bumping into her in the coffee shop and we were both fundraising at the same time. I knew her fundraise wasn't going well and neither was mine. And I said to her, how's it all going? And she gave me, you know, the same kind of answer that's just, you know, oh, it's going great, everything's fine. I said, how about you? And I said, absolutely terrible. Like, we're getting nowhere. I was completely honest. And she just brought down her barriers and she said, I'm really struggling and I need help and stuff like that. So I just think, yeah, if you balance it right, you'll bring people into your network and just make sure you're constantly talking to people.
Brilliant, fantastic. Rachel?
I think for me it's a phrase I said earlier, which is like zoom out. So, you know, don't focus on that one thing that's gone wrong or that bad month or even that bad 6 months. It's like just zoom out, look at the bigger picture of what you've achieved. And also, it, you know, when you zoom out, I think that's when you can focus on the point you made earlier about like what does success look like to you. So zoom out and see if that gives you a really nice clear picture of your version of success, which can be completely different things to different people, but also completely different things to you at your point in your career.
Yeah,
so just
great.
zoom out, bigger picture.
And a whole topic in itself is not doing that social comparison. That's a huge topic in itself, but like sometimes we get so distracted about what other people are doing, thinking, and I'm going to talk about it in the mindset session about, well, why am I not at that point? And I think you just got to focus on your own journey as well. Thank you so much, ladies, for being so open and honest. I hope you've obviously, you know, shared some tips that people can take away today. So if we can give our panel a round of applause.